Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Battle Royale, currently on Tubi, T-U-B-I. It's a free movie and TV service that at the end of the day you can say you've seen a number of things for free. So go ahead and watch this one with ads placed somewhere into the movie. Or maybe you have your own copy of this because maybe eventually you found a English dubbed version of this and you want to recheck it out because it's been a while. Uh, a lot of people will say that a lot of things stole from this. Blatantly, obviously, of course they did. Um, like a lot of people will say that the Hunger Games basically ripped off from this, which I don't know. Like it seems like they had like a whole backstory of the Hunger Games to really justify its different kind of approaches or things that are to make this a tweed bit different. But you can also say there is still like similarities that can't be ignored. Uh, a lot of people will say Fortnite, like, oh, you don't have Battle Royale unless you have Fortnite, which technically I don't think that's true because I think, like, Fortnite, like, at first I think was like a defense game, but then eventually it turned into, like, the Battle Royale that we consistently know and get memes about, even though, like, like, come on, like, stop giving me all them Fortnite memes, come on. So like even to this day, like it's crazy how many skins and things have been added to Fortnite over time, and there still hasn't really been a sequel to that game. It's like no, it's just gonna keep staying the way it is, and like they could easily get a ton of money from making another game, but instead they're just amping up the game and just adding a billion accessories to where it's like, dude, we never need to make another game or anything like that out of this. We can just keep going and doing Fortnite and just adding other kind of additions to this game. Uh, so now, kind of talking about this stuff that's kind of similar to this movie. What is this movie about in a very tee up like fashion? Well, I didn't realize how dark that this movie was. There are seemingly some times where people are to hang themselves and take their own lives in this movie. There are points in times when there's to be some backstories that are just like, man, that's kind of dark. Uh, oh, really? Also, speaking of like things that feel similar but like aren't exactly, there's to be this anime called Assassination Classroom, which consistently I bring up lately because there's a lot of stuff that kind of tie into like a Assassination Classroom. But instead of all the students in the class dying, we have one alien who ends up coming in, and all the students need to kill off this alien teacher. And while this teacher is to be surprised by all these eventual students trying to kill him, eventually he weirdly ends up teaching them something to make them better, to make them seemingly more skilled at something. And like it's just kind of an interesting or fascinating like approach to this show. Like I think I got pretty deep into the season. Then like I think eventually I might go back into it just because I enjoyed Assassination Classroom. But check that anime out. But anyways, back to the teeing up thing. So the movie is of course very dark. But so we have this group of students that are supposedly to be chosen by random. I don't like that. I don't like the randomness. Like I wish that there was a real like reason why everyone was chosen because then you would have a backstory for every single student. Like you would kind of quickly just say like okay, like this person like maybe not like 30 different stories because that would take too long of a film, but like you can kind of have like out of like the 30 people, you could have probably had about roughly 10 characters that had these kind of quick kind of like backstories, kind of like what you would do for like a group film where like they're not like they're just kind of like they're brought into the fold and like for this movie, and there's like not 30 bajillion other like crossover movies to get to this point where you kind of have to rush and tell everyone's backstory. Uh, like, because also, like, there were certain characters who were eventually in the story, you eventually get to know them, but still, I just don't think that that was good enough. Anyways, but so these students were picked at supposedly random, and so they are to be sent to this island because they were to go onto this field trip. And every time that I was to like see that bus like scene in this movie, it immediately made me think of the one movie Tag, where all of a sudden all the girls are on the bus, and all of a sudden there's this weird like monster wind like thing that is to just blow all these girls' head off simultaneously, and the bus driver to I think only save one girl off this bus. But then there's this bizarre wind monster or something that happens in that movie that ends up killing people. It's weird. Um, to eventually, like, this girl in this entire movie is like running from the wind, and eventually the movie gets more and more obscured. But anyways, pushing on. Go ahead and check that one out also. Like, I think that one might be very hard to find, but maybe you'll find it somewhere. But yeah, so we have these students that are to be told that they are going to have to be forced to wear these necklaces, and these necklaces are to have bombs upon their heads. So I'm like, so this is kind of like Suicide Squad, or what I've seen fairly recently, the Belko experiment, where eventually these people are to have to go throughout this island, and if there is a dangerous part of this island, that whoever is to say is to no longer be a place for these people to stay in. That's the dangerous part of it. People's heads will blow up because they were supposed to leave that part of the island. So eventually these kids all have to kill one another off. It seems that there were two exchange students that end up being added into the mix of this story, and we find out that one guy who is Kawadada, I believe that's his name, or Kawada, is to have eventually been from a previous game where he ended up winning, just to be shifted to this other game. And it's like, okay, well, that sucks. So he ended up winning just to come back to another game and being killed off yet again. So that's where I was coming up with a concept of, like, I had this story called Playing God, where eventually you have, like, this sponsorship kind of thing, but it's like a fight to the death kind of video game world, where eventually, like, there has been a person that had fought before, and is just stuck in this game forever until eventually someone kills him off, which is going to be an extremely rare thing because this guy is going to be so focused. And if anybody is to die, it's to not be him, just to keep him around, just to make the game even more and more creative. Till eventually, like, the following season, like, everyone would just be like headhunting for this one guy, and then things would eventually amp up to making that story more interesting. So, but Kawada is, I hope that's his name. I'm sure I'm going to butcher a lot of names. I guarantee you that. Kawada is to eventually go and help out some people, but let's bring that back. So, we also have another person that was supposedly picked just to know that he was to kill a lot of people off. And he knew what he was in for. So the one thing that I think that this movie makes a mistake about is just really the school uniforms of people. I'm sorry, if I have a thing of clothing at my disposal, because it looks like all these people do, they have their own little luggage thing. What I would immediately do is I would find a pair of clothes that blends into my environment, not something that blatantly sticks out like a white shirt or like a tan blazer. I would go into the Predator route of things or the First Blood route, where or Hunger Games also did this, where eventually like a person would cover themselves head to toe in mud and just be like just blending into their environment. Or eventually, maybe you'd have much more suitable colored clothes that would blend into a much darker environment, like a camouflage shirt or green pair of pants. Um, that would easily much more blend in. The stupid thing about this movie is everybody who's to have any kind of clothes is to have these bright colored clothes, which I'm like, God, these people are the dumbest people ever. There's to be this one girl who's to be running around in this bright yellow like tracksuit, thinking that like every day is like back to a normal day. That she still has to run and whichever. I'm like, so she has no weapons on her, and she's just running around like it's just kind of like she's not going to die anytime soon. I don't know. I just thought that these people were like so naive or so stupid that I'm like, dude, your life is on the line, and you're just gonna go and run out and jog it out and just get really winded, and then by the time like someone could have been following this girl until she ends up getting gassed out, and that's when they could have easily just killed this girl, because obviously she's running around in this bright yellow like you could see her from a million miles off. So there was not to be one person that was to eventually blend into their environments, with the exclusion of the one guy who was kind of like hiding into this one little leaf thing. So let's bring that up. The guy with the axe, the little axe, like that was actually smart, but everyone else was playing this severely dumb or naive to just say like, oh yeah, like hey everybody, let's get together, like hey let's like hide out together, because of course these people are young and stupid and dumb, um, and a lot of people were just thinking, oh no, nobody's going to really kill everyone off. It's going to easily, like somebody sneezes the wrong way and someone's going to get a freaking bullet in the head. Like that's how this should have been played out, because everybody wants to go home. But then they realize, like towards the real true end of this, no one goes home. No one is really going to go home. That is a mistake. To where if you think that you're going to win, like you might as well just be saying like, well, I'm going to write out my last will and testament because I know I'm going to die. So, so yeah, I liked certain action parts of this movie. I liked how like we just had these kind of twists and turns throughout this film. I thought it was really fascinating. I really enjoyed it, and like it was interesting to go into the sequel of this, but the sequel really isn't that good. The sequel really isn't good. Like the sequel does nothing like the first one does. Like I think it starts out like that, but then immediately it has this hard turn where eventually we have people coming back from the first film to all of a sudden try and like take out the people that are putting this game together, and it all of a sudden just becomes like a quicker variation of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, The Running Man. If you've never seen the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, The Running Man, oh my God, are you missing out? Because that was such a fun movie. Um, but excuse me. So with that said, let's go into spoiler time of this movie so we can go out of our way and to say we've seen this film, because I have. And let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So there was to be a backstory of certain characters, which we have Kawada's backstory, that he is to have been a guy from another game who ended up surviving, and the last person he was with was his girlfriend, and his girlfriend weirdly had this smile right before she was to die, and he didn't quite ever understand what that smile was. And we also have one of these girls in this story who is to eventually be with these parents that I guess her supposed father or maybe like some other guy that this little girl was with was to have supposedly had this Barbie doll where this guy was to remove the clothes of the Barbie doll and say that this girl had to perform the exact same act. Well, this little girl goes and shoves this guy down a flight of stairs, breaking his neck and killing him off. And so I guess that this girl was to have been maybe shipped off to eventually be maybe adopted or something. I don't know. I don't know what that backstory was. I didn't really understand that, but like they just had to put a very dark story to make a certain kind of character very hard and very like difficult and whichever. So so pushing on. So all right. Very beginning of this movie, all these kids are going on what they are to believe is a field trip. We have one kid who specifically had not really gone to school all that much, but decided to go to school for this one day when they were to have this field trip. Because eventually, we have the teacher of this class who eventually is to kind of point out that this kid only came to class this day because of this field trip and quickly kills him off because of that. And so all of a sudden, we are to find out that that the one main focused guy is to eventually, I guess, be best friends with this guy, Shuya. Narahara, Nanahara, like he has to have like a real connection with him. So we have this teacher called Kitano, and so Kitano is to have eventually, before this whole thing gets kicked off, evidently he got stabbed in the back by some student, and this student ends up running off. And one other student is to grab the knife from this guy and just kind of hide it away. And Kitano just kind of just washes his kinds of hands of blood and just like, okay, like, all right. So, like, evidently this is an everyday thing for a lot of teachers in this place. So, just getting stabbed is just like, nah, like, I guess it's a normal everyday thing. So Kitano is to come in to really just say that he's a part of this government organization who is to put this whole thing together. And so eventually he is to turn on this TV to have this woman who seems way too cheery for some bizarre reason, as well as her, of course, being a very attractive woman still, like very weirdly like yee for like knowing that a lot of people are going to die out of all this. So I'm like, why is she so happy about this? So so we have this person over the TV that is to mention to people that eventually what's going to happen is that this island is eventually going to have certain zones that people will no longer be able to go into, or otherwise their necklace will explode. Like, of course, Kitano had already shown people that that had happened. And immediately once that happened, people freaked out and started to run to certain parts of the classroom or whichever. But so we also had a moment where Kitano was just to be frustrated with a lot of students because they were whispering to one another. And so eventually Kitano, like, is to like give like one person a warning, but then other like students just keep on whispering to one another, and so Kitano busts out a knife and goes and chucks this knife right into this girl's head, killing her off. And he's like, okay, like, does that cement to people that you should stop whispering to people? Like, you need to listen to every word that I'm going to tell you because it will equal survival. So the woman on the TV is to mention that evidently they are to get this this bag with them that looks like a very much like military bag, like a duffel bag or duffel bag. No, that's not right. Like because I know people from the military, so I've kind of seen those kind of bags. So what's inside this bag is to supposedly be a bunch of water, a thing of bread, and then there is usually some kind of weapon of some kind in the bag. And like some things are like maybe useful as a survival thing, but like not all of them are weapons. Like some of them are like the crappiest things that you could have possibly gotten. Um, like we have certain people who end up getting like a pot, like kind of like a cover of a pot, like a kind of shield kind of thing, which I'm like, man, that has got to be like the chintziest weapon. Or you get one woman that has like binoculars, or you get one person with like this paper fan. I'm like, what are you gonna do with that garbage? What are you gonna do with that? But eventually, we also have certain people with um, knives, blades, or guns, or shotguns, or like machine guns, like the short machine gun kind of things, not like real machine. Anyways, pushing on. Like SMGs, I think. I think that's the right word. I don't know gun words, but anyways, pushing on. So eventually, what ends up happening is that when people's names are to be called off through this TV, people are to say here and go and get their bags and then run off. And so I'm like, weirdly, like, why would you shout out your name? Or why would you shout out here to a TV screen? That just seems kind of weird, but I guess it's like, hey, do what you're told. So they start naming off these people's names, and so people are grabbing bags as well as their own blue bag. Uh, they end up getting also their military survival bag, and then they run off. And I would just be like, dude, like I'm gonna go through my bag and just kind of find like the changing of clothes kind of quickly, so that way I'm gonna blend in better to my environment. But I'm also gonna get further freaking off to where there aren't other people around. So it's basically like run like mad, and then eventually just be like, okay, I think I'm at a far enough distance where I can now like rip off my clothes and change into a much more like hidden attire, or I'm just gonna find a big fat thing of mud and just slather myself in mud to blend in, cause it's smart. Cause freaking, I'm gonna just like figure out ways to just blend and hide and whatever. And then when people are just coming by, I'm like, oh hey, I kill you. So the goofy thing is, we have people in this classroom who are just like really good friends, or it seems that there's a lot of like classmates that have crushes on certain other classmates, and so we just consistently have these people who are just like, well, no, like, how about you come with me because I can help you? And dude, everyone is going to die, and we eventually have these stupid students that are to consistently mention how they had crushes on certain kind of people and whatever. But I'm just like, dude, these people are so gonna die. It's gonna be awful, but it's going to happen. So, uh, so right off the bat, we as like people are to start to get out, um, I'm trying to, okay. Oh, there we go. I want to try to get the names quasi correct here. So here's the thing that I think ruins this game right off the bat. So whoever is to be called first and to go out there is to probably be the first one to kill a person because if they have a really good weapon, man, are a lot of people going to be dead right away. So like someone could just wait out in the very first like opening of where all these students are running out and shoot every single one of them, and the game would be quickly over. But I guess it really doesn't matter now, right? That um, like there isn't a real even kind of thing for everyone. It's just like, hey, if someone is to get out first, they can shoot every single student. And man, would this game end like this? And like that really ruins this movie to just be like, dude, you could just have a machine gun, luckily, and you could just go through and wait for everybody and just through everyone, and you would win. And like, man, that movie was a waste of time. This movie only lasted like 30 minutes. Uh, like, that's the dumb thing that I don't think someone thought about when they did this film. Because immediately right out of the gate, uh, when just like a handful of people were to make their way out to run out there, all of a sudden we find out one person who is to be Tendo is to get shot in the neck uh, by this one guy who is to have this crossbow. I'm like, yeah, that person's gonna freaking die. Obviously, whoever is gonna have the crossbow and is to be able to like use that thing easily and quickly. Yeah, a lot of people are gonna die here because it's a distance weapon. So, the next person to die is Yoshio Akamatsu. I'm going to ill pronounce a lot of things, and I hope people understand that. But this person ends up getting shot in the chest with an arrow, um, of course, by Kazushi, and he's the guy that ends up kind of hanging with this like crossbow for like the rest of the film. And like eventually he gets mixed up with this one girl that he's been wanting for a very long time, the girl who ends up having the tracksuit in this movie. And he ends up trying to say like, well, hey, how about we can like confess our love right now? And like, don't you want to die without making it with somebody? And this girl's like, no, like, I don't want to make it with you. And so then the guy is to eventually like, well, hey, I have a crossbow here. Like, I could have easily just like forced myself onto you, and what could you do about it? And the girl is just like, well, yeah, I'm sure you could have. But then eventually, once the guy ends up firing the arrow, and like it almost like hits her face, she's then like, oh, okay, well, you're gonna die now. Because good luck trying to quickly like uh, put another arrow into this crossbow and to quickly fire it, because I'm going to kill you. So, uh, so pushing on, we also have uh, a character that is to kind of quickly, once he is to get his items, that's when we see this character quickly killing or trying to kill a lot of people off. Kazu Kuriyama. This is the guy who is to have been this exchange student, and he easily and quickly kills a ton of people in this movie because he is the guy sent here knowing full well that he is wanting to kill a number of people off quickly, and he takes advantage of stupid people. And I actually like this character because, like, anyone who is to do dumb stuff, he's to basically call them on doing that by killing them off. And so I'm like, yeah, go ahead, kill people because they're stupid. Kill people. Like, there's this one girl in this movie who has this like this megaphone, and she is to like call off to people and just spot certain people and just like, hey, come with us. Like we're gonna have a place where we can kind of just hold out, and maybe we can come up with some kind of like figuring things out kind of conclusions. And so uh, Kiriyama uh, goes and just kills a lot of these girls off because they're stupid. And then he ends up going and holding a megaphone to this girl's mouth while he shoots her to just blatantly say, like, hey, if you're going to do something stupid, you're going to pay. And here is the carnage that is at your wake if you continue to do stupid things. I have no pity for the ignorant. It feels bad that these people end up getting killed off, but like there's people that are dumb, obviously in this movie. There's people that obviously need to have just blended into their surroundings, but they don't do that whatsoever. So oh yeah, he had an Uzi. That's what Kiriyama had. He had a Uzi, and he ended up killing uh, Hir Hiroshi. Hiroshi, sure. So and also we have oh no, we got to that already. We also have Saga Gawa, who ends up also getting shot by. So, like, we're kind of rattling off, like, who ends up getting shot by Sho. A guy named Sho ends up getting, like, just Kiriyama ends up going and just murdering a bunch of people. Nume ends up getting. Nume, Kane, uh, and then we end up also having two kids deciding that they want to, because I guess they're technically lovers. They end up deciding to go and take their own life because they don't want to be involved in this game. They don't want to kill anybody. And so they go and they chuck their items, and then they go and jump off this cliff. And I'm just like, God, that's got to be like the worst way to die. But I guess it's better than like having to like. What if? Here's the thing. Here's the horrible thing. What if they jump, smack against these rocks, but they're still alive? What if the fall didn't do a good enough job? Like, that's when you end up seeing like two other like students or whatever just hang themselves horrifically. Uh, but again, like two kids end up dying from that. Um, so, uh, and then there's two kids that hang themselves after that, which is freaking horrific. Um, so now there's to be this moment where like things are really just starting to pop off, and so we have this one girl who is to be kind of focused here uh, by uh, Mitsuko. Mitsuko. Mitsuko and this girl called Ito are to be in this like kind of little house, and I think also Mitsuko is to find this one girl with this taser, and so this girl's had this like taser and she's to try to defend herself, but really, like, the girl's like, really, a taser, like, man, that's really gonna do some like horrible thing to like one person. Like, if they just have like a really bad heart or something, like, you can maybe just kill them off easily with a taser. And then so this girl with this sickle ends up stabbing this girl, and then all of a sudden, eventually, there's to be this girl with this handgun, and so uh, Mitsuko ends up kind of juggling around with this girl's gun, and eventually, like, they kind of fight over this gun, and then so Mitsuko ends up going and killing this girl with this handgun because they kind of juggle around with it. Because it seemed like this girl took way too much time to just kind of talk to Mitsuko, and that was a mistake. So, I think after that, that's when they like eventually do the report about how many numerous people have died, and then eventually they start stating to people like when parts of the island are going to be cut off at certain times. I'm like, hopefully all these people have a watch on them, because how will they know? Like, how will they know what part is safe or not? And plus, also, like, how will they know exactly like what when they're not in a like out of range part of the map to where they could be safe? That just seems weird. Like, I liked it in Fortnite, where eventually Fortnite would eventually just kind of shift like this kind of blocking like thing to where you can obviously tell like the purple part of the island, which is like, okay, this is the most unsafe part of the Fortnite island. I need to now shift into this one safe spot. Um, that actually made a lot of sense to me. Like, I think parts of like Hunger Games, they ended up coming up with certain uh, like kind of force fields, or they would come up with like certain parts of the island that would force people to go in much more of the middle. Like, they would have these uh, like these weird blood ocean like things, or they would have this uh, like acid like cloud or whatever that would come in and like would force people to go into much more of the center of the island, um, which I thought was a really fascinating part of that movie. But we don't have that here because we don't have that kind of money here. So people just have to kind of figure out, like, oh, okay, I guess I can't go to this part of the island for whatever reason. But anyways, so pushing off. So now we get to the part where eventually Nanahara is to find the guy that has kind of just been bunkering down in this like leaves or brush of a thing. And so he ends up jumping out with this small little axe and ends up going and swinging at these people. I'm like, so in other words, this guy didn't find the right outfit to blend into, but hey, at least he figured out a spot to jump out of to just kind of surprise people. And so eventually they end up having to like wrestle with this guy. And so Nanahara ends up going and axing this guy in the head, but it really doesn't look like the axe really goes deep enough into this guy's head. And it's like, it also feels like they kind of created this little towel on top of this guy's head to where like you can obviously tell that like this was like fakely put on there. It looks so cheap. Like, as if they really like they could have put the axe furthermore into this person's head to make it look like it really like did the job, but no. So uh so yeah, so they this person then ends up getting killed, and I think they end up like apologizing to one another afterwards. So uh so now all of a sudden we have Kawada that ends up coming into play. And so Kawada starts shooting off people with, of course, his shotgun, start firing people into the stomach. And so eventually Kawada is to come to Nahara and to mention like, hey, what kind of weapons do you guys have? And eventually they're just like, yeah, we have binoculars. Oh, we have this, we have that. So uh, eventually Kawada is to eventually find some handgun, which is just like a six shooter, and I think he ends up taking that from, of course, one of the guys who end up kind of rushing and trying to go and attack Narada and his girl that he's with. So so Kawada like tries to save them, and so eventually it seems like these three Kawada, Narada, and Narahara, Nanahara, Nanahara. I'm gonna ill pronounce that. I apologize. And his girl are to eventually just kind of become the best of friends. They kind of continue to be with one another, and eventually Kawada ends up giving these guys like some weapons to just like, okay, like just be safe out there because it doesn't seem like they're going and killing him to get his weapons from him. So he just eventually kind of hands them off weapons. So uh like I think this is the spot where these three are to eventually just start making it through the brush, and that's when we end up getting stupid megaphone girl that is to eventually just say, hey, like, yeah, we have a place, like, we found somewhere we can probably just hide out and like and just kind of figure things out. And I'm like, God, these people are so stupid. I'm like, this is like the Jurassic Park 3 spot where eventually the parents are just yelling for their kid in this part of this Jurassic Park island. And we have Scott Lang, or the character that had returned from the first movie, and he's like, "Don't do that. Like, if anything, there's so many dinosaurs out here that can hear you. You are morons. You are going to die." And so, really enough, they eventually just find out there's eventually a T Rex uh, in the vicinity, and then they're basically like, "Oh, I guess we're effed." Because of course they would be, because they're stupid people. In the Jurassic Park movies, like, I also have no sympathy for those people, especially the ones that end up coming back to whatever. Like Jeff Goldblum always is really just break it down, just like, yeah, like it seems all fun and nice at first, but then the screaming and the running and the so uh so eventually this girl's on the megaphone, just megaphoning it out. And so we have Kiriyama that is to hear these people, and it's just like to find them and gun them down because they're morons. And eventually he gets onto the megaphone, puts the girl to the mouth, and just shoots her. Just like, yeah, you guys are dumb. So, and I think shortly thereafter this, people are to scramble off to try to get away from Yurahama, and Nanahara is to eventually land with those other girls in that one place that the one girl is megaphoning them to say, like, hey, come to this place, we're all going to help you out. And so Nanahara is to get like bandaged up by this one girl who supposedly had taken off all this guy's clothes to put all these bandages on. And so this girl's like, hee, like, I've never like undressed a boy before. Hee. Like, but it seems that Nanahara is to consistently have women that are just thinking that he's the bee's knees. And so it seems like a lot of these girls have a crush on this one guy. But this girl, after bandaging Narahara up, locks him into this room because evidently there's a lot of girls also in this place that they're in that doesn't trust boys because they probably naturally assume that eventually a boy is going to come in there and kill them all off in their sleep or something like that. So, but stupidly, they'll do that to themselves. Uh, so I'm not going to rattle off names here. What I'm going to do is the scene that happens here is we have one girl who decides to put poison into what she's assumed is to be Nanahara's food, because she's like, well, again, I don't trust boys, so I'm going to put poison in this guy's food and take it, hope that one girl takes it off to him, and then he dies from poisoning. And so what happens instead is all of a sudden one girl rushes in and is to grab that plate, and the girl's like, oh crap. And so this girl just starts eating it. She's like, this tastes good. And then like, oh my god, like somebody poisoned this girl's food. What the heck? And so all of a sudden, like one girl who is to have this gun just blazingly fires through all of these people because she doesn't trust them because why would she? Like, somebody got poisoned here. So the one person that I think ended up getting to poison that other girl eventually is to be alive out of this. And I think the one girl who ends up shooting everybody, I think, just runs off after that. So Nanahara comes down there after kind of hearing that noise and is to try to like eventually come down there to see like what the heck happened, and is to eventually just like run off. So so now we push on to the moment of which that I mentioned before about the one girl who transitions into the yellow tracksuit to just go and jog her way, because evidently this is her backstory of her consistently being this girl that jogs every morning. So she ended up doing it this morning. And so we have the guy with the crossbow that is to approach this girl, like I had said earlier, and to basically want to force himself on her. And so coincidentally, this girl, who is to be Mitsuko, is to eventually stab this guy in the junk, and then he stabs he stabs this guy in the stomach, and then I think shortly after this girl does this, eventually, I think she ends up getting. I think she ends up stabbing somebody else shortly thereafter. No, I think someone else ends up getting shot twice. And then we have the whole stabbing of the crotch and whatever moment. But pushing on. So, we also have a moment where there's these three guys that are all going off to try and figure out if they can hack into the system and try to break the whole control of these bracelets on people. And so eventually these guys go into this whole little separate thing where they're getting these equipment together, and they end up kind of eventually breaking the system, and the military is like, oh, what's going on? But all of this is to eventually lead to have Kiriyama finding these guys, shooting and killing them all off. But then eventually I think he ends up going blind in the process. So, yeah. So, let me pause here for a second. I want to do a little recapping. Okay. I wanted to make sure that I got most most of the story, because I was like, okay, like I know that there were certain spots or whatever where there were kind of like really cool things that happened. That eventually there was to be this one guy that had this like bulletproof vest, and he was so like excited that he had a bulletproof vest. He's like, "Yeah, like I'm not gonna get shot." And so all of a sudden, Kiriyama comes out of nowhere with this blade and just chops this guy's head off. And eventually, uh, when Kiriyama is eventually going to fight out Narahara uh, and Kawada, he ends up going and putting a grenade into this guy's head and chucks it into the room and tries to kill these people off with this grenade. And it just ends up that eventually they kind of safely make it out of that place that they were in. So while Kira Yama was eventually killing all these guys who were to have figured out something, Narahara and his group ends up kind of coming up to eventually kind of see what's going on. And so eventually this leads to having a blind Kiriyama fighting off Kawada. And so Kawada eventually goes and kills Kiriyama because, of course, because he's blind. And so eventually, after all of this mayhem, after all these killing off of people, eventually there's to be three left. Like, I hope I got most of the story down. I also feel like there's some spots where I just blatantly was trying to rush through and whatever. And not everything was done perfectly. So I'm sure there's some little spot that I missed or whichever. But I also just kind of wanted to like not make it to where I'm just counting down every single death to try and just go, oh, I'm gonna get to the spot where I don't have to feel like I have to notch down every single death and how it happened and whatever. So also the very beginning of this movie, we end up having this little girl with this little like uh, teddy bear thing where they end up saying that she ended up winning this contest, and like she's slathered and covered with blood. So I'm wondering if that was like the like one of the other battle royale games, or maybe they just said that this girl was a winner because they end up finding her like in some kind of it must have been some other battle royale game that eventually this girl ended up winning, and they televised it and whatever, and they did it on the news, and eventually that pushed to eventually having Kwana win also another one of these battle royales. Um, but weirdly enough, like, so the one girl I guess ended up going home, and like the news was covering it, but Kawada ended up just being forced to go into another game of this. So what is to have supposedly happened is now there's three left, and so Kawada is to be with Narahara and this other girl, and so Kawada is to tell these people that he lied about this girl that was smiling, and so he supposedly kills them off, and so we have Kitano with the rest of the military group is like, oh, he must have won this season. Oh, well, that's great. Now this thing is over. So Kawada ends up coming back into where Kitana and the rest of these people are, and but it seems like Kitano knows a little bit more than what he's really led to really believe. There was also this one moment where Kitano was to like be out there in the field, giving this girl an umbrella, which I thought was so weird. Like I was like, why would he be going out there knowing full well everyone is going to desperately want to kill that guy off? But I guess that's the risk you run. So we also have at one point where Kitano is to try and call his daughter, and his daughter is to mention that even through the phone, she can smell his horrible breath because maybe he's an alcoholic or whichever. And it seems that the only person that is to maybe have some kind of love for him is possibly his daughter. And so eventually he calls her before he ends up dying to say that, oh, I guess I won't be home after all. And so he ends up chucking the phone after like talking to her and shooting it because he's just so like upset with this whole girl, and he's happy, probably happy that he ended up dying after this. So because what happens is Kitano is to find out that Kawada is to have like tampered with the necklaces because he ends up trying to like blow off Kawada's head, and he's like, "Oh, you tampered with this, didn't you?" And he's like, "Yeah." So eventually, Narahara and his girl come back, and they're still alive. So Kawada kind of pulled a switcheroo or a kind of swerve on this whole story, and so they end up going and killing Kitano, and then they all decide, all three of them all decide to go onto this boat to make it onto, or to make it away from this island. And so what ends up happening is, I guess, Kawada ends up bleeding out, or is to probably just die because he was probably meant to. So we just have this scene where Kawada is just to be laying on this boat. It is to mention, like, hey, I know, or I figured it out now, why the girl of his was smiling. And so I guess he was to have a smile before he was to die, realizing that he's probably going to make it to heaven or just be like, okay, this is all over now. And that there is to be this kind of accepting of your death before you are to die, hence why the smiling. And so the two that are left are to go on uh, to eventually make it back to land, and are to eventually just become two homeless people that like the one girl ends up going to her home and saying goodbye to her parents and getting the one knife that was from the stabbing of earlier in this movie. And so both these people just end up going on and just kind of roaming around through the streets, being homeless, I guess, to like, so whoever was to win, like, they were either to probably be shifted off or forced to go into another game. Like, there is no grand prize at the end of this. Like, really, you could say the grand prize was maybe, like, they could have gone home, but, like, that's not a real certainty either. Really, it's just for them to have consistently kept going into this grinder of dying or getting killed off, which eventually they end up going back in sequel and doing that anyways. They go back and they try to go within the system to try and take this system down, so that way no one else has to be forced to play this game anymore. And so, like, I guess, like, that could be interesting for people to want to see the sequel, just to see the conclusion of these characters or whichever. But the sequel just really isn't that good. I didn't like it. But anyways, I'm going to get out of here so I can do other things. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Really, I got some things confused, or there was just kind of like just a notch of things that I was just to put out there. Like, I was trying to avoid, like, trying to do like a notch of deaths or whatever. I was really just trying to like do the story, but then I realized it's like, well, like, I also need to know the freaking names of everybody. And so, like, the names basically helped out, like, kind of and plus also, it's like, well, I guess I should get the death order right, because then that'll confuse a lot of people. So, like, I tried to do this the best I could. But with that also said, like, I try to make this as, like, trying as much as possible to not copy and paste seemingly from something. But oh well. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.